This is a quick video on the Resident Evil 2 Remake demo. It has to be a quick video because the demo itself is pretty quick. Once you play for 30 minutes you don't get to play it again. Which is kind of a shame because the original time demo was fun to replay and see how far you could get each time you played it. I would have preferred having 10 minutes of gameplay but being able to replay it over and over again instead of 30 minutes of gameplay and never being able to play it again. I didn't really see anything I hadn't already seen, but watching a game and playing a game are two very different things. Getting hands on with the game certainly hasn't changed my opinion. I'm still really looking forward to this game, and probably even more so now. The first thing I want to talk about is the elephant in the room, the over-the-shoulder camera. And the strange thing I want to say about this is that it's not an over-the-shoulder camera. At least not in parts. So when you're playing the parts with combat, the game is a traditional over-the-shoulder game, and what I mean by that is wherever you move your camera, your character also looks. For example, whenever you've got your flashlight in the combat parts, it kind of has to work like this because when you move your camera in a direction, the flashlight follows you. And in fact, I wouldn't want it any other way in this type of third-person game. You kind of need that for the combat to work. However, in the sections of the game where you're exploring and looking for new items and not fighting zombies, the game's camera actually kind of changes. You have full control of the camera and you can move it wherever you want, and this feels much more cinematic actually, and something that I wasn't expecting before I played this demo. Your character's movement is independent from the camera, something like what we would see in one of the Legend of Zelda games. I think this was a really good move by Capcom. And they kind of solved a problem. That problem being that they have lost the cinematic feel of the fixed camera angles, but in some ways they're bringing it back by giving you full control of the camera and being able to move it about wherever you want. I think this camera really builds atmosphere, and I think in general the game's very good at building a atmosphere full of dread, and it's actually very claustrophobic feeling, which is exactly what you want from a survival horror game. I was really worried they wouldn't be able to match the atmosphere from the original Resident Evil 2. I've seen so many modern third-person shooter games fail at adding a good atmosphere. A good example of this is Resident Evil 6, where I just felt it had no atmosphere at all. And I think it has a lot to do with pace actually. I found myself really just wanting to explore parts of the demo, and that's probably why I didn't get very far. I'm really looking forward to taking my time with the full game and exploring all the new environments, just like I did whenever I played the original Resident Evil 2. Next up is the enemies. The first thing I do with any zombie game I buy is I test out the zombies to see just what they're like. How do they behave? How do they act when they get shot? For me, it's essential that any zombie game has believable zombies. And typically I like my zombies to be slow moving, relentless, robust, and actually pretty dumb. For example, I wouldn't like zombies to have weapons of any kind or carry guns or anything like that. So what are the zombies like in the Resident Evil 2 remake? I can't think of a time where I've seen more robust zombies. When I first watched footage of the game, I was actually a little put off by the fact that the zombies don't die from a headshot. That is one other thing I always look for, and I have to admit that I find it off-putting whenever I see a zombie not die from a headshot, because so many zombie films and culture is revolving around the fact that you have to headshot a zombie to kill it. With that being said though, I think it really works in this game, and Capcom were quite smart for implementing it, because I was always worried that with an over-the-shoulder game, headshots would just make the game too easy, and pretty much Capcom has found a way of getting around that by not letting the headshots kill them right away, because the game would be really easy if that was the case. The encounters with the zombies can be really long and drawn out, which I think is brilliant, and a little reminiscent of the Crimson Head zombies from the Resident Evil 1 remake. Just because you downed a zombie in Resident Evil 1 remake, it didn't mean that they were dead for good. And the same can be said for Resident Evil 2. I constantly found that I would down zombies, leave the area and come back, and they would get back up again. And I believe this is why this game will work as a survival horror game. Unlike action games where you put a few bullets in an enemy and then never have to think about them again, in Resident Evil 2 there's always that chance that they might still be alive or get back up later on. which means you can actually spend a lot more time avoiding the enemies. The guns are actually designed really to buy you some time to do what you need to do in that area and then run away from that area. And this is true with every good survival horror game. So let me describe an example encounter with one of the zombies. When I was walking down one of the very iconic hallways from the first game, I noticed a zombie banging on the window. Now I could have boarded this window up and prevented the zombie from coming in, but I used my board on a different window, probably by mistake. But the use of these boards also lends itself to being able to avoid the enemies, which I would argue is a golden rule of survival horror. Because I didn't board the window up, the zombie quickly got through. And I decided to play around with this zombie a little bit because I was on my own with her. And first of all, take out her legs, using about 4 of my bullets. Then I started going for her other limbs, but she kind of just gave up and lay on the floor. I assumed this zombie was now dead, thinking that 5 bullets should be enough to take down any zombie. I kind of assumed, well, that's pretty standard for most games. I guess I can't expect much more than that. So I proceeded to look around the room for some items. On my way out the door, I was surprised to find out this zombie was still alive and she jumped me. Luckily I had a combat knife, so I was able to stab her to get her away, but this only bought me time and still she was not dead. I was amazed that she was still alive, but luckily the door closed on her and she had no way of getting back out to me. What I want to point out here is that this was a set piece, but it also played out in quite an organic way. Everyone who plays that section will have a different experience, and the encounter will be a little bit different every time. And just when you thought that 4 or 5 bullets and a knife in the throat was quite a lot for the zombie to take, I realised that I actually had to go back into that room, and I decided to see what else the zombie had left. So I thought, what about if I shoot out the zombie's arms? Can the zombie still crawl after me? So I shot one of the arms off, right down to pretty much the elbow, but the zombie still continued to crawl after me with one arm. And bear in mind that I've shot the zombie's foot off and its other leg. By the time I shot the zombie's second arm off, I thought there's no way this zombie can still be alive or still try and get after me. It now pretty much has none of its limbs really. Not only was the zombie still alive after all of this, but it was still trying its best to crawl after me. I've definitely never seen zombies this robust and this relentless in a video game. One other section I'd like to quickly talk about is the bookshelf area. And I think this will pretty much sum up what this entire game is going to be like to play, or how you'll play it in the harder difficulties and how it's going to play as a survival horror game. So this area has 3 zombies which slowly start to come to life. What I mean is that they're lying on the floor, not moving, and then slowly one by one they get up and start following you around the room. I begin to methodically headshot each of the zombies until I think they're all dead. And this allows me to look around the room for items or puzzles. Something occurred to me while I was playing this game early on. How can we fight zombies and also explore or do puzzles? And this is the answer. What happens is you headshot the enemies enough, they lie on the ground, you think they're dead, but actually they're just stunned, temporarily. The reason for this is that it gives you some time to quickly work out a puzzle or move an object or whatever it might be in that room. It just buys you time. And in this way Capcom is having their cake and eating it. How do you have a game with action elements but is also a survival horror? By making you have to both avoid the enemies but also being able to shoot the enemies. I think this mechanic works really well, and I was really surprised to find that not only one of these enemies got back up, but all 3 got back up. I think this is going to lead to really interesting and organic combat. And I also think that Capcom may have found a way to please fans of all genres. This isn't going to stop me from wanting a fixed camera angle Resident Evil 2 game in the style of the Resident Evil 1 remake, but I'm certainly not going to let that put me off what looks to be one of the best games of 2019, and a game that I've been looking forward to for a really long time now. Hopefully when the full game comes out I'll make some more videos, and I really hope the quality of the demo represents the quality of the full game. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to share your thoughts on the demo too, I'd love to hear them.